Louisiana is often called the #1 pro-life state in the Union. My next guest is a native daughter of the state and responsible for a number of laws designed to protect women and their children. Here to discuss the challenge to a law she drafted and some new legislation is Vice President and Chief Counsel at the Bioethics Defense Fund, Dorinda Bordlee. Dorinda, thanks for joining us from Latrobe, and we're going to tell people while you're there in a moment. But coming up in March, Dorinda, the Supreme Court will hear a challenge to a Louisiana law that requires physicians who perform abortions to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. Now, you drafted this law. What was it designed to do, and how did this case make it to the Supreme Court?
Well, thank you for having me, Raymond. And yes, so this law is, you know, what you would think is a common sense, pro-woman, pro-life law. And what it's designed to do is to protect women who find themselves in the position of facing that trauma of having an abortion, often because they're being coerced or not supported, and their lives are precious too in the eyes of God, and they deserve to be protected. There are no medical risks of abortion, just like with any surgery, and so when a woman faces one of those risks, punctured uterus, torn cervix, the doctor who has engaged in that procedure should be able to admit her to the hospital. It's called hospital admitting privileges. He should be able to follow his patient and provide the care that she needs rather than abandoning her to the emergency room and losing that valuable time when she could be bleeding out. It's very simple.
Now, this Supreme Court case is fascinating, okay? In that the High Court is ruling on two matters: the law itself that you just described and the third-party standing, the person bringing the suit. Explain both elements of this and what's at stake here.
So the reason why this case is going to the U.S. Supreme Court is because the state of Louisiana actually won in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So the Court of Appeals said this is a reasonable law, it's designed to protect women's health, and so they upheld it. Well, the abortion industry decided to ask the Supreme Court to take it up. And the Supreme Court did take it up, but our friends at the Louisiana Attorney General's office did something that's wonderful and strategic for life. They said, well, court, if you're going to take this up, we want you to look at this doctrine called third-party standing. And that's the practice that's been happening where abortion industry representatives and their lawyers have been suing the state and challenging these common sense regulations and pro-life bills like ultrasound laws by saying that it hurts women's health, and they're claiming to speak for women. Well, guess what? It's 2020. Women can speak for themselves, and not one woman came forward to complain about the fact that a doctor can admit her to a hospital. And so we're asking the court in the state of Louisiana to get rid of third-party standing and let women speak for themselves. And if we win on that, then you'll see about 80% of the cases that the abortion industry brings against pro-life laws completely go away. So it's a really big deal.
Yeah, this is a seismic ruling, or could be. In 2016, the Supreme Court rejected a similar law in Texas. They said it was unconstitutional. An abortion provider required doctors to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. It mandated that abortion clinics meet state requirements for licensed surgical centers, and the majority of the court said the law created an undue burden on women. How is this case different from the Texas one that this Louisiana law is based on?
Well, it's different in a couple of ways. That Texas law didn't have a record of the state of those abortion clinics. Here in Louisiana, we have a record of severely substandard practices. Abortion clinics are just falling through the loophole from every other ambulatory surgical center. And so we have that evidence that the court has before it. We also have a new court, right? There are two new justices on this court that weren't on the other court. We have Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh. So this will be the first pro-life case that will be heard on the merits before this newly constituted court. And that Texas decision was really ill-advised. It caused a lot of confusions in the federal court. So we're looking forward to them cleaning that up and hopefully letting states legislate in the interest of both women and children.
Now, there was an additional rider or an addition to that Texas law that's different from this Louisiana version, correct? What's the difference?
That's right. The Texas law required that not only do you have to be able to have privileges at a hospital to admit a woman, but that the abortion clinics themselves rose to the level of being an ambulatory surgical center, which is kind of like a small hospital.
Right.
Here in Louisiana, we don't have that additional requirement. We're just simply saying if you harm a woman in the course of an abortion, you should be able to admit her and treat her yourself.
Yeah, seems common sense. I mean, if you care about women. Is this case an indication that the Supreme Court may be opening to revisit Roe v. Wade, that 1973 decision?
We're hoping that the court will start to, hand back the rightful legislative power to the states, because Roe versus Wade, as academics on both sides recognize, was really the U.S. Supreme Court acting as a super legislature. They made rules. It was like a rule book, trimesters, and that is the function of the people through their democratic process. And so this may go a long way towards sending the abortion issue back to the states where women who have been harmed by abortion can tell their stories. Doctors who don't want to be forced into doing abortions can tell their stories. This is an important issue of life and death. It belongs with the people of the United States in their state legislatures and not with 9 robed rulers.
Chief Justice John Roberts, since the retirement of Anthony Kennedy, Justice Kennedy, has really become the court's new swing vote. In fact, he joined the majority to grant a stay, a pause on that Louisiana law that you helped write. Is that a concern to you?
Well, John Roberts really is the swing vote. Everyone's watching him. I think it was wise, though, a wise move to take this case up again and to let both sides fully brief it and fully argue it. Because, like I said, that Texas decision was issued at a time when Justice Scalia had just died. There were only 8 members on the court. It really wasn't a good representation of how this jurisprudence should be applied. And so we're looking forward to this newly constituted court addressing this in a way that's, that's fair and that recognizes the power of the state, the interests of women, and the human right to life.
You're doing a great deal to promote adoption in Louisiana, Dorinda, and since you're at St. Vincent's at the Fred Rogers Center, I'd like to play a little clip of Fred Rogers, the famous TV host who, of course, taught children for generations to be a good neighbor. Watch.
Well, my sister was adopted. I remember the day she came to our house. She was just a little baby. And when my mother and dad adopted her, she became my sister forever. My sister didn't look exactly like me, and she didn't look exactly like our mother or dad. But you don't have to be exactly like somebody to be able to love them.
Now, Dorinda, the Bioethics Defense Fund worked to pass legislation requiring Louisiana's Department of Health website to contain proactive information for birth parents about the benefits of adoption and require abortion facilities to feature information about adoption. How hard was it to move that those bits of legislation and remove the stigma from adoption?
Thank you. Yes, Bioethics Defense Fund was honored to work with Louisiana Right to Life, who had created a film called I Live on Parker Avenue about a young man's adoption story and how he found his mother, who had chosen life as she laid on the table at an abortion clinic. She had heard someone say outside, your baby has 10 fingers and 10 toes. And as she thought about that, she said, I can't do it. But then she didn't have the resources. She didn't know where to go. Thank God she did find adoptive parents. But what we realized is that, half of the battle is saying this is a human life, don't abort your baby. But then what? If you're not ready to parent, that's okay, because there's a heroic option of adoption. The thing is, how do you navigate that? And so what we did was this legislation created information from the Department of Health, the Louisiana Department of Health, And the abortion clinics have to have that on hand and give that to the woman at least 24 hours before an abortion. And that way she can look at how can she do an open abortion? Who can she call to get more information? How can she maybe choose the parents of her baby if that's what she chooses to do? So it's concrete information to take those first steps to adoption, which is such a loving option.
You meant open adoption, not open abortion, right?
I'm sorry, open adoption, of course.
Okay,
Yes.
I just want to clarify here. Now, a pro-abortion
Yes.
group, a website, listed the legislation you work to promote that advocates for adoption, or at least presents that as a possibility. They claim that's anti-choice. Your thoughts?
Isn't that amazing? The abortion industry, they call themselves pro-choice. But if you're pro-choice, that means you're for giving women choices. You can carry your pregnancy to term. You can choose to parent your baby. You can choose to place the baby for adoption. Those are choices that women have the right to know about. Yet they want to hide this information. Why? Because abortion is big business. They're in it for the money, and they don't want to lose your money. And so we have to realize that we have now in the U.S. Supreme Court a huge multi-billion-dollar industry claiming to speak for women. And that's just not right. It's 2020. Women can speak for themselves, and we deserve to have all the information to make informed decisions.
Dorinda Bordlee, thank you for being here. As Mr. Rogers would say, it's such a good feeling to know you're alive, my dear. Your work at the Bioethics Defense Fund can be followed at bdfund.org. And Dorinda's also on Twitter at Dorinda Bordlee. Thank you. Have fun at Mr. Rogers Land. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymond. Bye-bye.